Ancient Lights by Algernon Blackwood. From Southwater, where he left the train, the road led due west, that he knew. For the rest, he trusted to luck, being one of those born walkers who dislike asking the way. He had that instinct, and, as a rule, it served him well. A mile or so, due west along the sandy road, till you come to a stile on the right, then across the fields you'll see the red house straight before you. He glanced at the postcard's instructions once again, and once again he tried to decipher the scratched-out sentence without success. It had been so elaborately inked over that no word was legible. Inked-out sentences in a letter were always enticing. He wondered what it was that had to be so very carefully obliterated. The afternoon was boisterous, with a tearing, shouting wind that blew from the sea across the Sussex Weald. Far away, the line of the Downs swept the horizon like an arriving wave. He, a scudding ship, hull down before the wind, took off his hat and walked rapidly, breathing great draughts of air with delight and exhilaration. The road was deserted, no horsemen, bicycles or motor cars, not a single walker. But anyhow, he would never have asked the way. Keeping a sharp eye for the stile, he pounded along while the wind tossed his coat against his face and made waves in the blue puddles in the yellow road. The trees showed their underleaves of white, the bracken and the high new grass bent all one way. Great life was in the day, high spirits and dancing everywhere, and, for a Croydon surveyor's clerk just out of an office, this was like a holiday at the seaside. It was a day for high adventure, and his heart rose up to meet the mood of nature. His umbrella with the silver ring ought to have been a sword, and his brown shoes should have been high-top boots with spurs under the heels. Where hid the enchanted castle and the princess with the hair of sunny gold? His horse? The stile came suddenly into view and nipped adventure in the bud. Everyday clothes took him prisoner once again. He was a surveyor's clerk, middle-aged, earning £3 a week, coming from Croydon to see about a client's proposed alterations in a wood, something to ensure a better view from the dining-room window. Across the fields, perhaps a mile away, he saw the red house gleaming in the sunshine, and resting on the stile, he took a moment to get his breath. Then he noticed a copse of oak and hornbeam on the right. Aha! He told himself. So that must be the wood he wants to cut down to improve the view. I'll have a look at it. There were boards up, of course, but there was an inviting little path as well. I'm not a trespasser, he said. It's part of my business, this is. He scrambled awkwardly over the gate and entered the copse. But the moment he passed among the trees, the wind ceased shouting, and a stillness dropped upon the world. So dense was the growth that the sunshine only came through in isolated patches. The air was close. He mopped his forehead and put his green felt hat on, but a low branch knocked it off again at once, and, as he stooped, an elastic twig swung back and stung his face. There were flowers along both edges of the little path. Glades opened on either side, ferns curved around in damper corners, and the smell of earth and foliage was rich and sweet. It was cooler here. What an enchanting little wood, he thought, turning down a small green glade where the sunshine flickered like silver wings. how it danced and fluttered and moved about. He put a dark blue flower in his buttonhole. Again his hat, caught by an oak branch as he rose, was knocked from his head, falling across his eyes, and this time he did not put it on again. He suddenly found himself treading circumspectly and with caution. The stillness in the wood was so peculiar. There was a rustle among the ferns and leaves, and something shot across the path 10 yards ahead, then dived again beneath the underbrush with the speed of a shadow. He started like a frightened child, laughing the next second that a mere pheasant could have made him jump. In the distance he heard wheels upon the road, and wondered why the sound was pleasant. He then realized he was going in the wrong direction, and had somehow got turned around, for the road should be behind him, not in front, and he hurriedly took another narrow glade that lost itself in greenness to the right. "That's my direction, of course," he said. "The trees have got me mixed up a bit, it seems." Then he found himself abruptly by the gate he had first climbed over. He had merely made a circle. Surprise almost became discomfiture. And then a man, dressed like a gamekeeper in browny green, leaned on the gate, hitting his legs with a switch. "Oh, I'm making for Mr. Lumley's farm," explained the walker. "This is the wood, I believe." Then he stopped dead, because it wasn't a man at all, but merely an effect of the light and shade and foliage. He stepped back to reconstruct the singular illusion, but the wind shook the branches roughly here on the edge of the wood, and the foliage refused to reconstruct the figure. The leaves all rustled strangely, and then the sun went behind a cloud, making the whole wood look otherwise. Yet how the mind could be thus doubly deceived was indeed remarkable, for it almost seemed to him the man had answered, spoken, and had he pointed with his switch to the notice board on the nearest tree, the words rang on in his head, but of course he had imagined them. "No, it's not his wood, it's ours." And some village wit, no doubt, had changed the lettering on the weather-beaten board, for it now read quite plainly, "Trespassers will be persecuted," instead of prosecuted. And while the astonished clerk read the words and chuckled, he said to himself, thinking what a tale he'd have to tell his wife and children later, "The blooming wood has tried to chuck me out. But I'll go in again. Why, it's only a matter of a square acre at most. I'm bound to reach the fields on the other side if I keep straight on." He remembered his position in the office. He had a certain dignity to maintain. The cloud passed from below the sun, and light splashed suddenly in all manner of unlikely places. The man went straight on. He felt a touch of puzzling confusion somewhere. This way the copse had of shifting from sunlight into shadow doubtless troubled sight a little. To his relief, at last, a new glade opened through the trees and disclosed the fields with a glimpse of the red house in the distance at the far end. But a little wicket gate that stood across the path first had to be climbed, and as he scrambled heavily over, for it would not open, he got the astonishing feeling that it slid off sideways beneath his weight and towards the wood. Like the moving staircases of Harrods and Earl's Court, it began to glide off with him. It was quite horrible. He made a violent effort to get down before it carried him into the trees, but his feet became entangled with the bars and umbrella, so that he fell heavily on the farther side, arms spread across the grass and nettles. Boots clutched between the second and first bars of the gate. He lay there a moment, like a man crucified upside down, while he struggled to disentangle his feet from the bars. Then he saw the little man, in browny green, go past him with extreme rapidity through the wood. The man was laughing. And he was not alone this time. A companion, like himself, went with him. The clerk, now on his feet again, watched them disappear into the gloom of green beyond. "They are tramps, probably, not gamekeepers at all," he said to himself, half mortified, half angry. But his heart was thumping dreadfully, and he dared not utter all of his thought. He examined the wicket gate, convinced it was a trick gate somehow, then hurriedly went on again, disturbed beyond belief, to see the glade no longer opened into the fields, but curved away to the right. What in the world had happened to him? His sight was so utterly at fault. Again the sun flamed out abruptly and lit the floor of the wood with pools of silver, and at the same moment a violent gust of wind passed shouting overhead. Drops fell clattering everywhere upon the leaves, making a sharp pattering as of many footsteps. The whole copse shuddered and started moving. "Rain, by George," thought the clerk, and feeling for his umbrella, discovered he had lost it. He turned back to the gate and found it lying on the farther side. To his amazement, he saw the fields at the far end of the glade, the red house, too. He laughed then, for of course in his struggle with the gate he had somehow got turned around, and had fallen back instead of forwards. Climbing over, this time quite easily, he retraced his steps. The silver band, he saw, had been torn from his umbrella. No doubt his foot, a nail or something, had caught it and ripped it off. The clerk began to run. He felt extraordinarily dismayed, but while he ran, the entire wood ran with him, round him, to and fro, trees shifting like living things, leaves folding and unfolding, trunks darting backwards and forwards, and branches disclosing enormous empty spaces, then closing up again before he could look into them. There were footsteps everywhere, and laughing, crying voices, and crowds of figures gathering just behind his back, till the glade, he knew, was thick with moving life. The wind in his ears, of course, produced the noises, the voices and the laughter, while sun and clouds, plunging the copse alternately into shadow and bright, dazzling light, created the figures. But he did not like it, and as he went, fast as his sturdy legs would take him, he was frightened now. This was no story for his wife and children. He ran like the wind, but his feet made no sound upon the soft, mossy turf. Then, to his horror, he saw that the glade grew narrow. Nettles and weeds stood thick across it. It dwindled down into a tiny path, and 20 yards ahead it stopped finally and melted off among the trees. What the trick gate had failed to achieve, this twisting glade accomplished easily, carried him in bodily among the dense and crowding trees. There was only one thing to do: turn sharply and dash back again, run headlong into the life that followed at his back, followed so closely that now it almost touched him, pushing him in, and, with reckless courage, that was what he did. It seemed a fearful thing to do. He turned with a sort of violent spring, head down and shoulders forward, hands stretched out before his face. He made the plunge, charged full tilt the other way, meeting the wind now in his face. Good Lord, the glade behind him had closed up as well. There was no longer any path at all. Turning round and round like an animal at bay, he searched for an opening, a way of escape, searched frantically, breathlessly, terrified now to his bones. But foliage surrounded him, branches blocked his way, the trees stood close and still, unshaken by a breath of wind, and the sun dipped that moment behind a great black cloud. The entire wood turned dark and silent. It watched him. Perhaps it was this final touch of sudden blackness that made him act so foolishly. As though he had really lost his head. At any rate, without pausing to think, he dashed headlong in among the trees again. There was a sensation of being stiflingly surrounded and entangled, and that he must break out at all costs, out and away into the open of the field's blessed fresh air. He did this ill-considered thing, and apparently charged straight into an oak that deliberately moved into his path to stop him. He saw it shift across a good full yard. He fell, saw stars, and felt 1,000 tiny fingers tugging and pulling at his hands and neck and ankles. The stinging nettles were no doubt responsible for this, he would theorize later, but at the moment it felt diabolically calculated. But another remarkable illusion was not so easily explained, for in a moment it seemed the entire wood went sliding past him with a thick, deep rustling of leaves and laughter, myriad footsteps, and tiny little active, energetic shadows and shapes. 2 men in browny green gave him a mighty hoist, and he opened his eyes to find himself lying in the meadow beside the stile where this incredible adventure had begun. The wood stood in its usual place and stared down upon him in the sunlight. There was the red house in the distance, as before. Above him grinned the weather-beaten notice board. Trespassers will be prosecuted. It now read prosecuted, not persecuted. Dishevelled in mind and body, and a good deal shaken in his official soul, the clerk walked slowly across the fields. But on the way he glanced once more at the postcard of instructions, and saw with dull amazement that the inked-out sentence was now quite legible after all, beneath the scratches made across it. It said, he read it, "There is a short-cut through the wood I want to cut down, if you care to take it." Only care was so badly written, it looked more like another word. The C was uncommonly like D. Dare. "That is the copse that spoils my view of the downs, you see," his client explained to him later, pointing across the fields and referring to the ordnance map beside him. "I want it cut down, you see, and a path made here and here." His finger indicated directions on the map. "The fairy wood, it's called, you know. That's what the locals call it, anyway. And it's very old, far older than this house. Well, come along now, if you're quite ready, Mr. Thomas. We might go down there and have a look around, eh?"